Thanks very much. And it's really fun to have a think about how we could build a more comprehensive national structure. Right to Dream has obviously operated within, as a private entity for the last 25, 26 years. But I think there's many learnings from our journey, but also my learnings from sport, which could really be relevant for the growth. As the Honourable Minister said, we're at a little bit of a low point today. So I started from maybe not our low point, but our starting point, which is 26 years ago when I founded Right to Dream in 1999. This is on a pitch in Legon with one of my first mentors, the late Robert Tete. And we started a youth team in Ghana. So my reason for showing this picture is to say, this is a Colts team. This was actually a poorly funded Colts team within Ghana. And we've managed to grow to the point where, many of our guests today have visited our academy in Old Akradi. It's a beautiful location, which I'll go on to talk about being, I think, an optimal destination for the development of young talents within Ghana. We have a great water supply, plenty of beautiful land. We have a direct power supply from the dam. So a really sufficient environment for developing Ghana's most talented children. We went from there in 2014, 2015, as people know, to be the first African Colts football team to purchase a professional football club in Europe. When we purchased FC Nordsjælland in Denmark, we had a clear idea that the stepping stone from playing football in Ghana to Europe was becoming more and more problematic for young Ghanaians. So we wanted to create an environment where we could control that first stepping stone into Europe. We built a team there. One of our first coaches there was Otto Addo. Today, Michael Essien is a coach in FC Nordsjælland as well. Derek Boating and Lai Kingston have also been there. So, but this was really, I think, transformative. A lot of young African talent loses its way in the transition period. Once that transition has been made and they understand the new context, then typically, as we see with some of our graduates, they fly and they can perform. But that transition period in any sport is really essential. And we've managed to position FC Nordsjælland as that transition for Ghanaian players, but also many of our Danish players who are now global stars have developed a lot by the influence of Ghana. You can see a young player like Mikkel Damsgaard starring for Brentford in the Premier League regularly now. He's trained regularly in Ghana at the academy in Old Akradi. So I think our vision can expand beyond developing elite Ghanaian athletes, but also this being a place where elite athletes from around the world can come and learn and develop. From there, when we brought in investment from the Mansour family in Egypt, we built our second Right to Dream in Egypt, in Badia. It's a beautiful facility and a benchmark within, I think, the North African, Middle Eastern, and certainly African context. And then most recently, about 2 years ago, we acquired the 30th franchise in Major League Soccer. And here's a time-lapse video of the third Right to Dream Academy in the ecosystem, which has been built in the mountains just above San Diego. It's really a beautiful facility. And now we have a team playing in Major League Soccer in the US. And you can see here from the first match, the 30th team, San Diego FC, playing with Right to Dream players on the pitch and Right to Dream coaches involved in the system. So my point being, before I outline sort of some of my ideas for how Ghana could move forwards, is that starting from an under-12s team with no funding 25 years ago, Right to Dream has grown to the point where it has a valuation in excess of $500 million and significant revenues. So it just shows, and everything that we've done has been driven on the talent of Ghana's youth. There's nothing that I can do without the performance of Ghana's talented youth. That's what's created this success, and we built frameworks and structures around that. So all of this success is driven solely from that reason. So, a little bit of a recap. It was already said quite nicely. We've had over 100 professional players come through just the academy in Ghana. Since we've been in Denmark, we've produced another 70, 80 professional footballers through the Danish academy. We've had over 50 internationals for Ghana. And the market value in Europe of our players has reached 180 million. So as the minister talked about some of the values and the size of the market, you know, a little bit of that demonstrated by Right to Dream. In Ghana, 30% of the entire market value of Ghanaian players is represented by Right to Dream players. In Denmark, it's actually the same, where 30% of the entire Danish market is represented by players who've come through our academies. And then very importantly, you know, the core premise at Right to Dream is that we create a world-class pathway for every child. So we've had over 80 student athletes go and study on full scholarships at American universities. It would certainly be my vision that a future minister and a future head of the PFA would be Right to Dream graduates, because they've been to the best universities in the world. They started with a passion in soccer and then have gone on to get world-class educations. And the value of that, again, is over $50 million in scholarships that have been accessed. So when Joy asked me to put together this kind of theoretical vision, this isn't you know, my personal ambition or personal plan. It's a theoretical vision from the things that I've learned. I've casted this vision of a national integrated talent identification, development, and entertainment strategy. Those are our core three pillars. How do we identify? How do we develop? And then how do we build an entertainment product around that? It's my firm belief that knowing the talent in Ghana's youth as well as I do, that Ghana has the potential to move from a natural resource-based economy to a talent-based economy. I think it is the most compelling investment case that Ghana has to offer, and the returns are actually exponential. You know, sometimes when the minister mentions these billions and trillions, in fact, is quite hard in some sectors of Ghana's economy to imagine where you get there, but within the talent of Ghana's youth, I believe is very easy to imagine how, if Right to Dream with its limited resources can start stepping into those quantums of money, that as a national strategy is very easy within a short period of time to achieve those types of returns. So what do I see? I think that the starting point is to develop a national talent identification strategy, but also a global talent identification strategy. You know, we lose a lot of our sons and daughters of Ghana to other countries' national teams. So we need to start with the identification of our youth. But beyond that, I believe that we can be much more proactive in recruiting the most talented Ghanaians in the diaspora. Secondly is to establish a public-private partnership, talent development free zone, or as in America, you might call it an opportunity zone. These are tax incentivized regions of the country. We know this very well in the agri sector with our free zones within Ghana, but I think there's the potential for a talent free zone or a talent opportunity zone that can actually make investment into Ghana talent much more compelling from a tax incentives perspective. And then thirdly, to establish a public-private partnership for a national sports and entertainment hub. The minister mentioned some of the most exciting countries, but another that has really excelled in entertainment in sports in Africa in the last few years is Rwanda, where we've seen so many of the best sports events on the continent going to a country which has no reputation until very recently within sports. So I think a hub for sports entertainment is also very possible. So if we talk about talent ID and development, how would I approach that? Through the formation of the Talent Identification and Development Corporation that would remain firmly in control of the government of Ghana, you would define the national framework, as the minister mentioned, through which all talent identification and development partnerships would be operated. And this, I think, is a crucial point, because when people talk about attracting investment into Ghana sports, if we take football specifically, we haven't struggled to attract investment, we've struggled to retain it. Ajax, Feyenoord and Red Bull combined probably invested 100 million euros into their academies in Ghana, and they've all left. And one of the reasons that they've left is because there was no coherent national framework for them to plug into. So they came and did their own thing with very little advice, with very little guidance and support, And as a result, we've lost them, and they could have been significant contributors to the national agenda. My starting point would be through artificial intelligence solutions, which I believe should be embraced very quickly within talent identification, is to assess the individual talents of each of Ghana's 800,000 12-year-olds today. You know, we have a role model in China, I think, here, that when they got the Olympics in 2008, started a national talent identification many years before to assess the individual talent of every child in China. And I think it's quite feasible for us to do the same. And then I would propose that the best 800 across a multi-sport solution come into a Ghana talent-free zone, a Ghana talent opportunity zone that has multiple incentive structures for local and foreign partners to invest into this free zone, to develop the 800 best each year that we've identified through a national talent identification model. And then I think one of the big commercial opportunities for us is if we are identifying, if we are trialing all of Ghana's 12-year-olds every year, how do we retain communication with those 800,000 children? At the moment, Facebook retain that communication, and Facebook derive all the revenues from communication with our children in Ghana. If we scout our kids in Ghana, why don't we retain communication with them and own our own digital assets that can communicate and develop our children rather than allowing that conversation to go to foreign entities? So to do this, I would partner with Ghana Education Service, assess the talent of every 12-year-old, and then I would sell licenses in our public-private free zone for talent developers to come in. So if we imagine today that Ajax and Feyenoord and Red Bull want to come in, we can sell them the license to come into our free zone. We can give them access to our open source data of all the talented children in Ghana, and then we can allow them to operate under government guidance within the framework and the national agenda of Ghana within our free zone. We don't have to do the whole thing ourselves as Ghana. We can allow foreign entities to come in and do it, but it has to be within a more clear structure than was previously given. So how would we fund this talent identification and development? I think there's some really interesting cases here. If we look at the All Blacks in All Blacks in New Zealand, one of the most treasured sports assets in the whole world was a national asset, but they wanted to sell a proportion of the All Blacks in order to raise capital to build the infrastructure and drive the brand forwards. And there was a national outcry about it, that you can't sell off a piece of our Black Stars, of our All Blacks, but they did. And they sold 12.5% for over 100 million. So if we're capturing the data and the talent of our children and we're putting that into a for-profit company, we then have the ability to sell to private investors that talent base and the future product of that talent base in the way that the All Blacks did. I think is a great framework for us. Secondly, tax incentives and equity. You know, in my personal opinion, the return on investment for corporate sponsors in Ghana into sports is currently quite low at the moment, but there are ways that we can do that. First of all, we can incentivize that investment with much more favorable tax conditions. If we look in Botswana, which is ahead of Ghana today in sprinting, which is almost unbelievable, the incentives for the mining sector to invest into sprinting are very strong. If we look at the car company VW, and I think this is a critical one for Ghana, they're the main sponsor of Wolfsburg Football Club in Germany, but they're also an equity partner within the club. So they sponsor, but they also derive profit from the true growth in value. So if I'm MTN and I'm offered equity in a national talent ID and development structure, I'm more inclined to want to sponsor as well because I have true skin in the game rather than cash out the door. And then we bring in our strategic partners, whether they be local or whether they be international, who have a passion or an interest in the sports that we're developing. So private investment, tax incentives, strategic partners, and then the grant makers. If we look at universities like Ashesi receiving multi-million dollar grants for developing Ghana's youth from people like the MasterCard Foundation, there's no reason why these major foundations that aren't interested in empowering the youth of Ghana can't invest into such a structure as well. And then I think the most important one, the good people of Ghana. I'm really inspired by, going back to Botswana in the 70s, they launched a campaign called One Man, One Beast, because they needed to build their first university. And in a cattle-heavy country, each farmer was encouraged to donate one beast to the national pot in order to build the first university. So in my vision, as we identify the most talented children in Ghana, there's no reason why we can't put a bracelet on our most talented children that means they can ride free on the trotro. It means they can eat in the chop bar for free. It means that they can go and get their school uniform for free, because as a nation, we need to build these children. It takes a village to raise a child. And I think that we can't look at government or private sector individually to build this. As a nation, we have to make a decision to build our most talented children. So inspiration from that one man, one beast philosophy is something that I believe Ghana's population can really embrace. And then the free zone itself, we love it in Akosombo. The VRA has a lot of land there. And so I think it's a really conducive environment to create a free zone, opportunity zone that creates the incentive structures for the partners to invest in. So that would be my vision, and I believe that this model can generate $200 to $300 million in capex to establish the kind of facilities that we need. And then I also believe it can generate 200 million plus in annual revenues to fund the development of our children. And that's before the profits that we make from this company. This is just to fund our operations. So our revenues would be, as I mentioned before, to commercialize the data of our children. As we scout them and retain them within our networks, we can commercialize that data like Facebook or Amazon, and that can flow back in and return and make returns for our investors. Each of our graduating classes can drive direct revenues into Ghana. By my estimations, we would have about $100 million a year in direct revenues from graduates from the program, if I look at the Right to Dream model, and retain full or part ownership of IP, economic, and image rights for the long term. That's one of the most important things I see within this. Right to Dream today, when our players transfer around Europe, we're still realizing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars every year in the solidarity fees that come. So I think keeping control of IP, economic, and image rights of Ghana's children for the long term can really be a source of revenue for this. And then this is one stat that I love. After Usain Bolt won a gold medal at the Olympics, generally bookings to Jamaica increased by 19%. So these are real, not pie in the sky numbers. And the fact is that Jamaica has much bigger crime problems than we have in Ghana. We don't have it. We're a safe, peaceful country. But that one ambassador can really transform the broader economy. And I'm talking about our 800 most talented children every year coming into our campus. So we can do Usain Bolt times 100, which can have billion-dollar impacts on our economy from a broader perspective. And then, as we all know, there's nothing like the soft power and leverage that comes from performing in sport. And that may ultimately be the biggest return on investment that's slightly harder to gauge. That's the development phase. In the entertainment phase, I would replicate the model. I would create an investor-friendly national framework, has been done in Rwanda. We've recently invested in the MLS, which is an investor-friendly framework. We don't have those investor-friendly frameworks at the moment in place in much of Ghana sports. So I would build the entertainment hub. As people can see, I'm a fan of Akosombo. I would put it there as well. I think it's a beautiful place with Senchi and the other hotels to combine going to watch sports, but also to relax and enjoy and be away for the weekend. So, and from that, I would establish our own local and international franchises that compete there, our own BAL franchise and so on, but also from there buy our own clubs and our own sports franchises outside as well, so that our talent can go and compete under our name and generate our revenues. And then I would use that to attract in the Diamond League, the ATP, the WTA, the BAL, the NBA, Red Bull, Riyadh Season, boxing. I think the global market is desperate for African locations. When Lewis Hamilton took a holiday to Africa 2-3 years ago. He left saying, I'm going to make sure that Formula One comes to Africa. And now they're within a hair's breadth of going to Rwanda. And I used to sit in my local spot in Akosombo and tell people one day F1 should be here. And people thought we were completely mad. And maybe we still are in terms of where Ghana Sports is today. But the fact is F1 is going to Rwanda, which is unimaginable. So if we put our hub together and we create the incentives, you know, it was a previous leader of your party, Minister, Professor Atta Mills, who said direct foreign investment knows no nationality. It goes where it's most welcome. So we just need to create that welcoming environment, because the appetite for sub-Saharan Africa to be on the global circuit for these sports is very strong. And then my framework is very similar again for the entertainment hub, which is the free zone, the redevelopment partners, because this comes with property development plays in a different way to an academy. Private equity, same kind of model as we had with the All Blacks. It was also the case with the Six Nations, the biggest rugby tournament, that they sold a percentage of their tournament to raise the capital to elevate the tournament. So we can sell a percentage of our hub, retaining control to inject the capital to build what we need. Strategic partners, Riyadh season in boxing is a really interesting one. Riyadh season doesn't just take place in Saudi, it takes place in London as well. So why not Riyadh season in Akosombo? And then franchise partners, as I talked about before. And then that leads into the mass participation, as was alluded to, where we can host mass participation, Ironmans and other mass participation events for the people of Ghana, but also international athletes. And hopefully I'm on time.
You are. Thank you so much, Tom Vernon. And one of the things that strikes so much is the whole idea of having, you know, a free zone, you know, enclave where you're going to have all participants, and based on that, you know, we're able to generate all of these revenues. And of course, Tom has given us a little heads up that Formula One may be going to Rwanda, so probably they beat South Africa to it. But of course, that's the reality, that here in Ghana as well, as ambitious as it may sound, we have the potential to do it, based on what you've told us.
100%, and that's why I showed my original image, because if we can grow from that to what we have with a very small team, imagine what a national agenda behind this could achieve.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we do one more big round of applause for Mr. Tom Vernon? He is the president of the Right to Dream, the founder of the Right to Dream group, which has a multi-million-dollar sports enterprise around the world, with the newest, you know, endeavor in San Diego in the United States of America.